About 2 years ago, I visited the maximum security prison farm in Angola, Louisiana. I visited the old death row. I got to stand next to the table and even touch it that they would lay an inmate on in the lethal injection room. There was another small room next to this room, separated by a large glass window, where the victim's family, I would assume, and some reporters and similar would watch. Just before we entered this area, I was able to sit in a chair at the table where the last meal is typically served. I can't imagine that I will end up on death row, but I think that my last meal would probably be something like this: fried catfish with about a pound of tartar sauce. I mean, why worry about calories at this point? A side of creamed spinach, a big side, and probably a whole bunch of Hormel no-bean chili. And finish that up with some cookie cake or maybe some ice cream cake and a ton of sweet tea. The last meal, even for people who have done the worst things imaginable, is all about the person being executed. One day, I want to visit the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. This is thought to be the site of the execution of Jesus. We know the story. Jesus was stripped naked. He was bound to a column. He was scourged to the point of death with a whip made of tails with sheep bones or steel balls tied to them. Probably 39 lashes, maybe less and maybe more. Many think that Jesus couldn't even carry his own crossbar up the hill to his execution because the amount of blood loss from this whipping sent his body into hypovolemic shock. He was mocked as a crown of thorns is forced onto his head. He was spiked through his hands or his wrists and his feet. This is about the extent of pain and grief. You know, watching the ones you love, you came for and are dying for, mock you as they tear you apart. This is about the worst that I can imagine. This is crazy to think, but this is the point that Jesus spoke life to a thief next to him, who asked his buddy to take care of his mom in this extreme amount of pain. And he asked that his executioners, all of us, be forgiven. I'm assuming that the blood loss killed Jesus, but crucifixion can kill you in a number of ways. Cardiac rupture, heart failure, acidosis, asphyxia, arrhythmia, and pulmonary embolism. In any combination of those, or even something else entirely. And so to verify death, they then pierced his side, making sure that they punctured both his lungs and his heart. And just a side note, only a fool would think that somebody comes back from this kind of end. So back to the maximum security prison. The last meal is pretty much whatever they ask for. I've also heard that some inmates get to make last requests. They get one-on-one time with a priest or a pastor. The state then is charged with making this time and the execution itself as pain-free as possible. The inmates are advised to take advantage of everything offered to them because, you know, these are their last moments. It's funny that before the Lenten season, people will often indulge their most selfish desires preparing for what they are about to sacrifice. Before his execution, Jesus' last request was to wash his disciples' feet. He showed who he is in this request. When Peter responded, "You will never ever wash my feet," it really showed who we are. Before his sacrifice, Jesus served his last meal to his friends. "This is my body," he said, "given for you. My blood poured out as a sacrifice for you." One guy at the table who had been as close to Jesus as anyone was about to betray him to his enemies. And Jesus even served this guy. Jesus' one-on-one time was spent in prayer with his friends. He encouraged his friends. When his enemies showed up to arrest him, he even spent some of his last moments healing them. And then, knowing about the whipping that was coming, the crowns, the mocking, the nailing, the spear, and all, Jesus then walked willingly to his doom. Where we indulge ourselves before we sacrifice, Jesus shows who he is before his sacrifice. His last moments show the same thing he showed all along. He wasn't there for himself. One day I hope to visit the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, to mourn the loss of the one who died in my place. Good Friday seems to be such a depressing and defeating day, but Good Friday had to happen because of what was coming. See, the neat thing about that church, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, is that it's also said to contain the site of the event that removed my greatest fear. Easter is just around the corner.